I'm rolling.
I'm looking at you.
You're gonna look here. I'm gonna cross the axis here. Okay, today is the 3rd of December, 2017. We're at the house of Moshe Brodetzky on Rehov Avshalom Chaviv 32 in Jerusalem. Moshe was a member of the United States Army and a member of the Etzel, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Moshe, please tell me where you were born and a little bit about your parents and your background.
I always answer that question as I was born in Jerusalem, my soul. Physically, I was born in Michigan City, Indiana, a suburb of Chicago. My parents were Palestinian refugees in World War I. My family, they were born in Jerusalem.
Your family was born in Jerusalem?
Yeah, my mother and father.
They were both born in Jerusalem?
Yes. My father was raised in Jaffa, though. He grew up in Jaffa.
Yeah.
And my mother was in Jerusalem. They were married just at the outbreak of World War I, and the Turks expelled the Jews.
Where were your parents from?
Jerusalem.
They were born in Jerusalem?
Yes. Yeah.
What generation were they of Jerusalemites? Do you know?
Well, my father really wasn't a Jerusalemite. He was a Japhite, I would say. And the Mediterranean was his swimming pool. He learned to swim. He was a very good swimmer. My mother's family was generations in Jerusalem.
Do you know your mother's maiden name?
Robinson.
Robinson?
Yeah, our tradition is, according to her, we're descended from the Rosh, Rabbeinu Osha, who was a refugee from Germany and Spain, Toledo.
Toledo, yeah.
I'm going back, you know.
That's good.
So,
tell me a little bit about your what year were you? What's your birthday?
July 3rd, 1924, second day of Tammuz, Rosh Chodesh Tammuz.
So your mother and father were both born in Ottoman Palestine.
In fact, my mother had Turkish citizenship. She even has a birth certificate in Turkish.
And do you know where in Jerusalem they lived? Did they live in the old city or?
My grandfather built Shaarei Tzedek, the hospital. So I'm trying to think whether it was known then as Makol Baruch, but they were like the settlers then outside of the walls of Jerusalem.
Exactly. Makol Baruch is where today the edge of Mea Shearim is.
That's right. So,
Ashkenazi family? Or Sephardic or Samechtet?
My father is a Litvak. You can't get any more. In fact, he was a student of Rav Kook. When Kook came to Palestine, he taught in the Talmud Torah in Jaffa, where as a kid, my father was a student. And my mother, they came around the time of Civil War in the mid-800s. They came, you know.
From Russia.
They came from Suwalki, which is border of Lithuania and Russia.
And they came to Jerusalem?
Yeah.
They were Chassids?
No, they were. That's interesting. They were not Hasidim.
Are they part of the first Aliyah of the 1880s? Your mother's family?
I think they came even before that.
Even before. And your father's family's from where? Do you know? Lithuania. You said.
Yeah, my father's family, they came from Starovin. That's the same town where Rav Moshe Feinstein came from. He was a friend of the family. In fact, he was.
Your mother and father meet in Ottoman Palestine.
Yeah,
Do you know how they met? Is there a story behind that, or?
My father had 4 sisters, and he was the youngest. So, in a way, he was like an orphan being taken care of by his sisters. On the other hand, my mother had 3 brothers, and she was like their, big sister, even though she was just one was older, 2 was younger.
Do you? I mean, your father was from Jaffa and your mother was from Jerusalem. In those days, that was a huge amount of distance, because to get from one place to the other, it was like a 2-day carriage ride or something like that, or how did they meet?
How did they meet?
First of
all, I never asked them the details.
Their names. Please give me their names. That's the most important.
My mother was Frede, and the maiden name was Robinson. And the name Robinson because the traditions, they were descendants of the Rosh, a famous rabbi from Toledo, who himself was a refugee from who had been a student of, what was the famous name? Meir Rothenberg. And
your father's name?
Yankov Leib.
Yaakov Brodetzky.
Yaakov Leib. He was
Do you know?
We're descended from the Malbin. He was a famous commentator 100 years, more than 150 years ago. And
do you know what year your parents were married?
Just outbreak of World War I.
Really?
So I guess 1914, I don't know what date.
Do you know why they were deported? Do you know where they lived? Like what?
No, the Turks expelled the Jews.
Were they living in Tel Aviv? Because the Turks... No.
Tel Aviv was just beginning.
Yeah.
In fact, my father's mother was the founder of Tel Aviv.
And her name?
Her name... Why can't I remember her name?
Brodetzky.
No.
No. That's okay. Your parents leave Palestine? I mean, literally, they're forced on a boat to get out. Or plus minus, they have to leave. Do you know the story behind that, or never really?
At the outbreak of World War I, in fact, I don't know what the organization was, American Jews sent a boat to help take the Jews that were being, expelled by Turkey
to Federation, or UJA sent a boat?
Yeah, that's...
They sent a boat to Palestine?
And they went to Alexandria, Egypt.
So they went down from Palestine to Alexandria, Egypt, and then they got on a boat?
No.
No.
They got on a boat in Jaffa.
In Jaffa.
And the way my mother put it, that the living in Egypt then, those years during World War I, was like a honeymoon for her. That were treated very well.
The British were there?
She wasn't thinking about the British, about the Egyptians. They were Palestinian refugees in World War I.
Do you know how long they were in Alexandria for?
During the war.
The whole war they spent in Alexandria, Egypt?
My father was a teacher in the Talmud Torah.
Mm-hmm.
He himself was a student of Rav Kook. And then after World War I, many Jews from Jewry went all over the world. Australia, Rhodesia, you name it. You know, they became teachers, rabbis, mualim, whatever. Clay Kaddish, as they say in Yiddish.
So your parents spent the
World War I in
Alexandria, Egypt, and they're involved there in the Jewish community.
My father became a Melamed in the Talmud Torah.
Yeah.
My father remembers also when Jabotinsky came to form a Jewish Legion in World War I.
What does he remember?
They came, in the public and asked people to volunteer.
Did he volunteer, your father?
My father, no. He was what you would call him, not a yeshiva bacha, but he was a teacher like us. Did he?
So, after the war is over, World War I, do your parents, did they have any children while they were living in Alexandria?
Their first was stillborn. And then my sister was born, and they were back in Jerusalem already.
So after the war, they go back to Jerusalem?
Yes.
1918, 1917?
Yeah.
They go back to Jerusalem.
And the economic situation wasn't so good, so a lot of those Jews, my father's, as they say, Clay Kaddish, used to go. One guy went to Rhodesia, another one went to Australia, and my father, they went to America with those that went.
What, do you know the year that they immigrated to America?
1919, 1920. My sister was born in Jerusalem. Oh, and so was my brother, that's right.
Are you the youngest out of 3 children?
No, I had a younger sister who's since passed away.
So you were 4 children?
4.
And you were number 3?
Yeah, I remember I used to be jealous of my older brother and sister. They were born in Jerusalem.
Yeah, was it an issue? Yeah, it was a thing for you?
It was, a feeling.
When, in your house where you grew up, was there a lot of talk about Jerusalem and Zionism and?
It's all my mother. My mother was an outspoken Palestinian in those days.
Sure.
She helped form. There was a committee for a free Palestine in the late 30s. She helped organize it.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. We'll definitely get to that. Now, you're born in 1924.
Yeah.
In the suburbs of Chicago, which is actually in Indiana.
Michigan City, Indiana.
Michigan City, Indiana, 1924. Your parents had been in the United States for about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
What did they do? What is their occupations?
My father was a teacher in the Talmud Torah. And like a rabbi, a weekend rabbi. Michigan City was a small.
To me, Michigan City sounds like a lot of pickup trucks and shotguns.
Right. The Jewish community was basically reformed. They had a little Orthodox community, and he functioned as their rabbi, and he taught in Talmud Torah, I think, in Chicago. He used to commute.
How far was Chicago from Michigan City?
I imagine at least an hour, maybe.
Okay. Were you so you grew up in a very what we call waspy American town?
No, I growing up. What you're talking about growing up? Growing up is no. I didn't grow up in Michigan City. They left. They moved from Michigan City to Chicago. So I was only maybe 2 years as a kid.
So you grew up in Chicago?
Even to say I grew up in Chicago is wrong. I grew up in the Bronx.
Okay, we'll get to that in a second. So you're born in Michigan City. At the age of 2, your parents moved to Chicago, and then they moved to the Bronx?
Yeah, in the interim, they came to Palestine for not a year, less than a year, I think.
What?
I don't know if it was then or the next time they went. My grandmother was a founder of Tel Aviv.
Right.
And she bequeathed property to her children.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was the time of the Depression in America. My father, you know, it was like having on Ben Yehuda Street, owning property in Times Square.
Yeah.
In those days.
Wait, so during the Great Depression, your parents went back to Palestine?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. I'm just trying to get the chronological aspect done here. You're born in Indiana, in Michigan City, in Indiana.
Yes.
Then when you were 2, your family moves to Chicago.
Exactly, yeah. I don't know how that.
Okay.
Yeah.
After Chicago, where does your family go to?
They went to Palestine.
With you?
Yeah, the whole family.
So do you remember? No, you were young, right?
It's funny. My kid sister, may she rest in peace, had a memory. She remembers when she was 2 years old. I hardly remember when I was 5 years old.
Yeah. Keep on, I'm just doing something right here. Yeah.
And
okay, sorry. Your sister? Yeah.
You know, trying to remember, but...
So your family picks up and goes back to Palestine, and this is because of the Great Depression?
No.
No.
They once went to visit just before the riots from 1929. They were in Palestine for, I don't know, half a year or whatever year. But then we went again in 33, I think it was. And that was because of the Depression. My father didn't have any work. And he hoped, you know, having this prime property, but he wasn't a businessman. He even thought of setting up a little kiosk on the property.
And this was in Tel Aviv on Ben Yehuda Street?
Yeah.
Do you remember where on Ben Yehuda Street or no?
11, 12, I don't know the
Something
number.
Like that. One of the early numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
But and my father grew up in Jaffa. His buddy there was Dizengoff, the guy who became mayor of the, and he was a student of Rav Kook, who became the chief rabbi. And he hoped to find something doing. But my father wasn't a businessman, and he wasn't a wheeler and dealer and all that. So we didn't get anywhere. He spent more than a year trying to settle.
Was he alone there, or was he with the whole family?
With the whole family.
With the whole family. Do you remember that year? You were what? You were like...
10.
10.
That's the 24th. I remember I used to go barefoot in the beach on the shore of Tel Aviv. I loved it. In fact, when I was in America, growing up in Bronx there, a teacher was asking kids, you know, about their background. So I told them that this was one of the happiest periods of my life. Yeah. I was then, what, 12 years old?
12 years old.
Well, when I felt like
strolling around the beach of Tel Aviv barefoot.
Yeah. And my brother was a tough guy.
Your older brother?
Well, he was a tough guy. He was always a gang leader, no matter where he was.
And his name?
Sam, Shmuel.
Shmuel. What was the age difference between the two of you?
Only 3 years, but
Only 3 years.
that's it.
So the oldest was the sister,
5 years she's older than me.
then Sam.
Yeah, and then
and
my
you?
kid sister. And then my kid sister was 14 months younger than me.
Okay. So you and Sam were like chronologically one after the other.
No, my older sister was like a little mother to me.
Sure.
And my brother was a brother of the kids.
He was a tough kid.
He was a tough where he was.
When you grew up in the Bronx, you got to be tough, no?
Yeah. Then
So after that year that you guys spent in Palestine in 1932, 33, right? Something like that, roughly? 34?
yeah, we'll spend time. We were both there in 28, 29. We spent half a year.
But then you went back,
Yeah,
and then you came back.
yeah. First time was more like a visit, you know.
Right.
But second time was
the second time it was
to
really
hopefully
to stay, and your father
my father dreamt about
getting into business there and staying there. He wanted to come back, but
So-
that didn't work out.
he sold that property that we had for $10,000 then.
That was how much today? A lot.
$1 million,
A
say.
lot. $1 million.
And we lived on what he got through the Depression in the Bronx in America. Got us through until he found, a permanent position or
So
something.
it was worth it. Your family survived because of that
Yeah.
during the Depression.
All right?
My grandparents didn't have that luxury during the Great Depression, and they were also from New York, Lower East Side, Brooklyn. So tell me about.
But
growing up.
there was no extravagance, though.
Of course, you had to do what you
Yeah.
had to do in those times. So after you spent that year in Palestine in the 30s, what's your impression? You see the British soldiers there. You see like Tel Aviv is kind of a booming city in the 30s. No, it's like there's a casino on the beach. There's a lot of.
I was a kid.
I know.
That meant nothing to me.
Did you go to school in Tel Aviv?
Yeah, I went to Talmud Torah there, yeah.
In Tel Aviv.
In fact, I started in Talmud Torah in Jaffa. Then we moved. In fact, I remember living Shalom Shabazi. We lived in the poor neighborhood of Tel Aviv, if you can imagine. Shalom Shabazi.
Shabazi's in Neve Tzedek.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the old.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Today it's the most expensive real estate in Israel. Shabazi Street.
And I remember that I switched to Tachkamoni
Tachkemoni, okay, sure.
in those days.
Sure. And you spent a year.
And
Were you in any youth movement?
then
When you were in Palestine?
Then no.
But after in the Bronx.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
we'll get to that. So your family moves back to the Bronx. You guys moved back to the United States, right?
Yeah,
You're all naturalized. You're citizens.
I was
You were
born.
there. Yeah, you and your sister for sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure your parents are.
Yeah.
They got papers.
Yeah,
They moved to the Bronx.
yeah.
Where in the Bronx?
Washington Avenue.
Washington Avenue. That's in the south side, isn't that? The South Bronx?
It might to be considered south. Well, it wasn't south. South was a bad neighborhood.
Well,
I
that's
was-
what
I was
gonna
close
ask.
to it.
Now I'm going to ask you probably the most important question of this whole interview. You were probably a Yankees fan.
I wasn't any fan. That's the funny part of it.
I'm just joking.
I don't remember. If I was a fan of anyone, I was always a fan of the underdog.
So you were a Brooklyn Dodgers fan.
And it didn't. It had no meaning whether it was a Dodger or anything else.
I hear you. So,
I sided with the underdog.
so when you go back to the United States, you're about 11 or 12 years old. Your bar mitzvah, it's in the Bronx? Is that where you get bar mitzvah?
I didn't have an actual, bar mitzvah celebration.
But you went to the synagogue and
Yeah,
you
yeah.
Torah.
Yeah,
That was in the Bronx?
yeah.
Do you remember the name of the synagogue that you...
No.
But it was a small event.
I've been associated for the young Israel from all my life, so I don't know if there was there was a young Israel in the Bronx then,
Yeah.
but it was far away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah.
I used to walk there.
Now,
I was on one side of Cortona Park and on the other side of Cortona Park.
Now you're growing up in the Bronx, and you're
Yeah.
13 years old, you're 14 years old, you're 15 years old. I'm sure you live kind of in a mixed neighborhood with Italians and Poles and Jews, and is it that kind of situation that you're growing up in?
Yeah, I even remember each block had its own, and you crossed the border, you were in danger. I even remember that we used to gather stones on the roof in case we got attacked.
They would throw stones at you. Yeah?
Not by the Arabs or the British.
No.
By ourselves, yeah.
Was it ethnically divided, those neighborhoods? Was it like, you're an Italian, don't walk by here, you're Polish, you're a Jew, no?
More or less.
More or less. It was very, New York's a very territorial kind of place in general.
I became more aware of it when we moved to the east side on Madison Street.
In the Bronx?
No, Madison, Manhattan.
Oh, Madison Avenue. You moved to Manhattan?
Yeah.
When did you move to Manhattan?
When we came back from Palestine.
Okay. So you grew up, so basically your teenage years, you're in Manhattan, on the east side.
No, I always consider myself as a Bronx guy.
How come?
When we moved, we moved to the east side later.
Later,
no.
Okay. You're born in 1924, is that correct?
Correct.
So in 1942...
By the way, my mother used to tell me the whole town celebrated my birthday.
What town?
Michigan City was born. Was July 4th, even July 4th.
What's the date?
I was born on July 3rd.
3rd.
So, fireworks.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
So she used to kibitz me about that.
Now, you said that your mother was the more active Zionist in the family.
And how?
Can you tell me a little bit about her and her? First of all, tell me her name again.
Frida.
Frida?
Robinson was her maiden name.
Robinson.
The maiden name.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about your mother and her Zionistic activities in the States.
I inherited from her. My father was very, very passive, not... In fact, I wonder why I wasn't closer to him or he closer to me. Some people, they, kids follow their footsteps. But my father's family, they were all cold. Lithuania is a cold country. And my mother was the exact opposite.
They say that opposites attract.
Yeah.
So you were closer to your mother, or she was more of
She was
an influence on you?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Tell me a little bit about your mother. What kind of things you remember of her talking to you about, or like about the whole Zionistic movement and stuff like that?
Growing up, she always spoke about Jerusalem, She used to break up in the Bronx. They had the Nazis started to form, groups there. She'd go and break up their meetings, my mother.
Here's the thing I want to throw at you. 1933, Adolf Hitler comes to power in Germany. Do you remember? You were young, but do you remember? Not necessarily 1933, but like do you remember the gradual steps that happened in Nazi Germany that led to the outbreak of the Second World War? Like, do you remember Kristallnacht? Do you remember about? And then when I mean remember, do you remember your mother talking about it in the house? The Nuremberg laws, the annexation of Austria. Do you remember? I
remember, and I can't think why I remember that. We had a neighbor. They were a Jewish family from Poland. They decided to go back to Poland in 1936. I remember as a kid, I was 10, 11 years old.
Yeah.
I went to a barber, and he started talking politics to me. You know, people were very involved, you know. He was probably a devoted communist, but, you know, he tried to
rub it off on you a little?
Yeah.
Were your parents socialists?
No, my father was apolitical.
Your mother, apparently.
My mother was, if anything, she followed Jabotinsky.
Okay. And that rubbed off on you?
It's completely her influence.
Did you go to Beitar in New York?
In New York, yeah. But then when I was a little kid, I don't remember, but my sister, who was 5 years older than me, she remembered 1933, say, or 4. There was some sort of a demonstration, march. I don't know who's or what, but the Jewish, how they fought against, you know, one, I don't know if it was the Beitar or the Habonim or which group was which, but it was actually fist fighting.
Sure. Now, where do you go to high school?
That's my name to fame. I'm first graduating class of the Bronx High School of Science. A wonderful school.
You were the first graduating class? So is that where you finished when you were 18? You finished?
I did a year earlier. I was 17 when I finished.
Really?
Yeah.
So you're apparently a very good student. Was science?
They used to have a rapid middle school.
Uh-huh. Did you like sciences?
Not particularly, I don't know, but
you
whatever I did,
you were able to swim in it.
When I kept all my buddies in school there were geniuses. You know, some got Nobel Prize. I don't know what. So I did my homework. That's it. They did.
Now, when you're 18, when you finish high school, it's 1942.
Yeah, but I have to tell you something.
Please.
Before.
Please.
I always had a strong Jewish identity. So I had to fight in my student union council to have a Jewish society. I forget what we called it.
Like a Star of David? Or
whatever, the group, they have clubs, you know,
right.
they own.
You're talking about high school?
Yeah, I'm talking about high school then, yeah.
Did you experience firsthand any anti-Semitism when you were growing up in New York? That you remember? Verbally, physically?
If I have to say anything, I'd say the reverse.
That you didn't?
And I was a little kid. It was a Friday night. A gang of kids came up, you know, and said, give us, you know. I said, Shabbos. All I did was say Shabbos, and they understood.
And they left you alone. Where was this?
In the Bronx.
And they left you alone, yeah? Did you wear a yarmulke? Were you Like, how was your house? Was it like in the house be a Jew and outside be American? Was it kind of like that kind of philosophy? Like Mizrahi, Tnuat Mizrahi, they're like at home be a Jew and be observant and this and that, but when you're outside, be a German or be an Austrian or be an American.
I don't think we had that kind of a...
Did you?
You're a Jew, period, huh?
That I understand.
I don't think I wore it. In fact, when I became a yeshiva dropout and I came to a public school, my teacher had to explain to me, you don't have to wear a yarmulke. That's the way she put it to me.
Now, where are you on the outbreak of World War II in September 1939? Do you remember when the war broke out? You were 15 years old.
I remember my mother was very active, you'd say politically. And nothing was in the newspapers about what was happening in Europe, the English papers. My mother read the Yiddish paper every day, and she used to give me the gist of what was happening. I remember in high school, this was a year they admitted girls to be part. At first it was only boys' school, high school. I used to go on Blackboard and give the gist of the local headlines, what was happening to the Jews. I remember a girl practically spit at me, called me like a tool of colonialism. This is the time where you had, Stalin and what's his name, they had made their pacts, We had Jewish girls taking offense. The girls, most of the kids are Jewish.
It was a public high school, though.
Yeah, it was public high school, but it was mostly Jewish.
Now, I'm going to take you a few years ahead. Pearl Harbor. You're 17 years old.
Yeah.
You're in high school.
Yeah.
Do you remember the announcement of it? I mean, I know it was on a Sunday, but do you remember it? Do you remember that day?
All I remember is the feeling of it's unbelievable. How could this happen?
And the next day, your country's at war.
No, but my brother was. I'm trying to remember. Was he drafted? He was 3 years old.
Yeah.
I think he joined the Marines.
He joined the Marines.
Merchant Marine. He was on one of the boats that sent supplies to Murmansk in Siberia, at the beginning of the war. So he spent the war years on the boats. And later, when the American Army went into the Pacific, he was in the Transportation Corps. They were called island hopping from one island.
Yeah, sure. When you graduate high school, 1942, right?
It's 41 probably. I was a year earlier.
That's right.
Yeah, I was 41.
You're too young to go into the army.
I was in the OCS.
What's that?
It's like they have Nachal here now, Office Candidate School, where kids in school, took military training as an option.
Where'd you do this?
In the Bronx.
Hold on, I'll get that. And the guy will come in.
Rega.
Okay. All right. So you're doing this what's it called?
OCS.
OCS. So you're basically at the age of, when you finish high school at the age of 17, you're training
To be an officer.
to be an officer.
Officer candidate school, that's
Right.
I remember we once even had a targil, I don't know what you want to call it,
A maneuver.
reenacting some war of General Washington in Manhattan. Fort Washington or not.
How long did you do this for?
It's at least 2 years, I don't know. That's going to high school, being in addition to...
And at this time that you're doing this OCS, do you know that you're going to go into war?
I was just, I couldn't wait.
When do you finally get inducted into the United States Army?
I'm trying to remember, was I inducted or did I volunteer? I can't even remember. All I remember was my mother encouraged me to be a good soldier, a good Jew and a good soldier. Other mothers were crying when their sons.
Where did you leave from? From the Navy Yard in Brooklyn?
I wouldn't remember what. Probably I can't remember that even.
And where are you in the Army? Like, where's your basic training?
That was interesting. My basic training was on the West Coast of California in Coast Artillery. I was trained on 155 millimeter.
155 millimeter cannons. So you were in the Army. You were in the infantry. And because you went to this OCS, are you...
No, I didn't go to officers training because of my eyesight then.
Okay.
But then after this, I entered into the special training program they had. ASTP it was called.
ASTP?
Yeah.
What did it stand for?
Army Special Training Program, I guess.
And that's on the West Coast?
Well, it was in the Army in general, based on your capabilities.
Right.
I qualified for engineering and for languages.
Okay.
And I had the choice.
And what'd you pick?
I thought they'd teach me Arabic. Instead, they taught me Norwegian. Because that was one of the options in the war, beginning of the war, to invade Norway.
So you're in California, correct?
Studying Norwegian.
Do you remember any Norwegian?
Oh boy, sure I do. I can even sing you a song now.
Please.
It's a drinking song.
Okay.
Det var en god manderman som skulle till little Earl, som skulle till little Earl, hoppsassa, tralalala, som skulle till Binetterl.
Well, if you're going to invade Norway, you have to know how to drink, right?
It's funny, when on not many occasions, but the occasion where I was asked to speak about myself, and one kid in the audience says, let me hear you sing. So I sang the song to them. No, I guess I surprised them.
So where in California exactly are you located? Southern, northern?
Most beautiful place, the Carmel there, beautiful area.
Monterey.
Yeah.
Oh, Big Sur.
Yeah.
Ooh, beautiful. I lived in Monterey, California for 6 months.
Beautiful.
Oh, beautiful. That's a big difference from the Bronx.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that?
Right.
Isn't it?
Right.
So you're studying Norwegian. You decided not to do engineering, but to do languages.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, again, the reason I thought that they'd be teaching me Arabic.
Because you're from Palestine. You're from Jerusalem.
No.
Why did you want to learn Arabic?
because I know I was going to be in Palestine.
So you thought by learning Arabic they'd send you to Palestine?
Middle East, period.
Middle East. Okay. So what happens? You're studying Norwegian. You learn how to sing, talk. I'm sure they put you through a little bit of a beer course to also learn to teach you how to drink like a Norwegian.
You know, I never verified
You never what?
whether it was true or not, because I had put down the Yiddish, my language that I know, I put Yiddish.
Yeah.
And for some reason, a professor of agronomy in Minnesota, Minneapolis, where I was then, came to interview me. I think he was testing my Yiddish. I never studied Yiddish. It was just
But you learned from the home.
that's it.
Yeah.
So that he was looking for people, American soldiers, to be sent into the camps in Europe. I had that feeling. I never knew why.
This was in the States?
Yeah.
They sent you to Minneapolis?
That's why I was in the special training program. That's where I learned my Norwegian.
So you didn't learn your Norwegian in California?
No, it wasn't
California you did your basic training and artillery.
Yeah.
Then they send you to
Yeah,
Minnesota,
yeah.
where all the Norwegians are. And who live in America, they all went up there because it's cold. They love that. So they went, so you're in Minneapolis, and there's a professor, who is he? He's...
I don't remember. I don't
How
know
long
his
are
name.
you studying Norwegian in Minnesota for?
I know I finished the first semester. I qualified. We started at 40. We ended up 10 who qualified to continue. And then I got sent to OCS, to Officer Training School.
So where is that, in the South?
Yeah, Benning.
Alabama?
Fort Benning, yeah.
Fort Benning, right?
Yeah.
That's in Alabama, correct?
Georgia, Alabama, I wouldn't know the
See,
difference.
how long is it a half-a-year course?
They had a backlog, so I had a pre-officer training. It was a half year, you're right.
Half a year. And how was your experience in that officer's course?
Very interesting. I think only 1/3 graduated. I don't know, drop out. And the guy who was with me remembers that we had our graduation. Everybody got drunk, and I was teaching them to dance a hora. And in fact, when I drilled my, I was like a platoon commander. I used to drill them. I used to drill them to Adon Olam.
When you used to have the march, your soldiers...
Adon Olam.
Yeah?
They probably thought I was singing Martian or something.
What happens after you graduate, you become an officer? You're a lieutenant, correct?
It was right after the Battle of Bulge. So the Army was taking everybody, teaching them to be infantrymen. I became an instructor in firearms, rifle range.
Yeah.
And I once tried to figure out how many shots I heard a day, being an instructor on a rifle range in those days, when they were taking, cooks and clerks to teach them the basics and send them to Europe right after the Battle of the Bulge. And then I was assigned to my unit, the 71st Infantry Division.
Was it an airborne or just an infantry?
Infantry.
71st.
Yeah.
And you're based out of?
I don't remember even.
Okay. Where does the 71st go?
We came late. All I know is I got as far as the Rhine River, where I was wounded. Yeah. It's funny, you remember things as if it was yesterday now.
What do you remember?
We were going to cross the Rhine River, and on the slopes of the Rhine River there were woods, but before that there was a plain, you know, a field, big field. The Germans had ambushed us, and my scout, who was a hillbilly, said, "This isn't a place to be. We got to get into the woods." And he ran, and I followed him, and maybe a squad or two of my platoon followed me, not to get massacred by them. And that phrase, "this is no place to be," you know, remained. So on other occasions, I heard like when I was in Kibbutz Ramat Rachel, with the Egyptians attacked. I was in a Cheder Rochel observation post with another friend, a buddy of mine. And the Egyptians started to bomb shell. He also said, "This is no place to be." And the minute he left, a shell hit us. I was wounded then.
You were wounded again?
Yeah, Ramat Rachel.
Yeah, we're going to get back to that in a sec, but you're wounded. So you arrive in Europe towards the end of the war, is that correct? After the Battle of the Bulge. So we're talking
yeah,
about...
but the war was not over.
No, it wasn't over, but you get to Europe towards the end of the war, probably February 45, March 45, something like that.
I remember when our division came, my platoon was given the job of guarding the division property, you know, all those.
Sure.
So I had a platoon that I commanded, and I didn't get into the actual fighting until later.
Till later. And when you do get involved in the fighting, you get wounded.
Yeah.
Were you wounded by a shrapnel? Were you like what was your wound?
My scout got a bullet between his eyes.
Your scout?
My scout, the guy was
in my,
yeah. And I got a bullet through my helmet, in and out. I still live with miracles. I can't explain it. In fact, I had that helmet with me till I got to a evacuation hospital, I don't know, outside of Paris. And the orderly said to me, "You don't want that, do you?" So I gave him my helmet.
So you were wounded. Do you remember roughly where you were when you were wounded in Germany? Was it
the Rhine? The Rhine.
On the Rhine. And then you're taken to Paris. Did you
yeah.
Did you have an open cut? Did you have anything like?
No, it was, what I had was my foot, I couldn't walk. I had shrapnel that completely disabled me. All over the body, but the main thing was I couldn't walk.
So
I had to be carried.
They evacuate you off the battlefield?
Yeah, my buddy, platoon leader, took me to the first aid station. And we were flying in a plane, the old planes they had, you know. It was so frightening. I'm laying wounded, taken to a military hospital in Bristol, England.
Yeah.
And then back to the States.
So they took you back to the States. So the war is over for you after you're wounded.
It's interesting. I was crossing the Atlantic, being taken back to America, and my older sister Molly got on the first boat to come to Palestine that she could. And we figured out we crossed it.
So you go back to the States, you recover from your wounds, correct?
Yeah.
You get discharged, apparently.
Yeah.
Fort Dix, probably? New Jersey?
That, or maybe there was a base in California, what it was called. Yeah.
Your brother, the war is over, your brother comes back also safely from the war?
Yeah.
Yeah? The family's reunited, except for your sister who's in Palestine?
We didn't have a family reunion.
Well,
if you want to put it that way, no.
Not a reunion like as a celebration, but you're all back in this.
My older sister went to the Pentagon, worked in the Pentagon during the war years, and my kid sister just finished her college, also volunteered to work in the Pentagon. And I decided to go to the Hebrew University, Tzofim, on the GI Bill.
Would they let you?
Yeah.
But it's outside of the United States.
You could go wherever you wanted. Guys went to Paris, I don't know, you name it.
So you decide after the war that you're going to take your GI Bill and go study at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem.
I didn't have to wait till after the war. I was still an active student.
But the war's over.
Yeah.
And what is it exactly that you want to study at Hebrew University?
I said agronomy. I wanted to be a chalutz.
Agronomy. And your mother is probably encouraging you?
Yeah, but she wasn't involved in the decision making of it. In fact,
now after the war, the situation with the British here in Palestine goes up a few notches, and the DPs are being put in camps in Cyprus, and the DP camps in. Where are you? Are you involved in this? Do you know what's going on? I'm sure you do.
I've joined the underground. I was in the Etzel.
Okay, so where did you join the Etzel? Where were you? Where did you swear allegiance to the Etzel? Where were you?
Yeah, that's funny. I took my oath at the home of Rivlin. You know Rivlin? So there, I had a small ceremony, with a Tanakh and a gun you take it to. I remember that.
Where was it?
Jerusalem, somewhere,
So it's after you arrive here, so you
while I was at the Hebrew University.
Okay, so let's go back. You go to the Hebrew University. What year do you arrive here? Do you remember?
48, I guess. No? 48.
So you arrive after Kuftet ben November, after the partition?
Yes.
Which is...
Oh,
Yeah?
I was one of the few people that wasn't celebrating. To me, it was the division of Jerusalem.
For you it was what?
It was partition.
So you were against the partition?
Other people were dancing in the streets.
You were in New York when the partition took place?
No, I was in Jerusalem.
But you said, but the partition was in 47. The UN partition, Kaftet ben November, was in 1947, in November.
Yeah.
You
Yes,
said you got here in 48.
I was at the Hebrew University.
Okay. That's why I asked you, what year did you arrive here to do your studies?
I'm a little confused on me, but
Okay.
more or less.
Okay. You remember being here on the partition, the UN partition?
And I remember being against it.
Okay. How did you get to Jerusalem, you're going to study, you're studying here. How do you get to the point where you're swearing allegiance in the Etzel? I mean, how did that happen? I mean, how did you go to the Haganah or the Lechi, or what's the story behind that?
I guess I had a reputation as a Beitari, so people knew about me. I have cousins. I have one cousin who was in the Lechi. I didn't know that. I remember meeting with one of the leaders of the Lechi when I was at the university. He used to meet me in a cafe. I don't know if I could say we spent hours talking. So I told him I can't make my decision until I speak to someone from the Etzel. So there were 2 or 3 other Americans at the Hebrew University studying with the GI Bill who were also approached by the Etzel.
Who were the contacts?
There was a young student from South Africa who approached me. I'm trying to remember his name. Ugh. It's bad when you try to think like that.
But he approaches you, and you make the decision.
It's funny, I can't, we met, it's like a scene from a movie, He met holding a paper or something in front of a bookstore or something like that. No, I wasn't hiding my affiliations or my views, so. In fact, there were 2 or 3 of us Americans. They were getting people to join the Haganah. So our sympathies were with the Etzel. So we opted to be volunteers in the ambulance, Magen David Adom. So, could avoid being in the Haganah until we made contact with the Etzel.
How long did it take to make contact with the Etzel? Did it take a while? Because I'm sure they were very cautious.
Yes. Yes. Very cautious. So people was, well, in fact, I'm trying to remember, my kid sister volunteered and went to a kibbutz. In fact, she took part in defense of Ein Hatziv when the Iraqis came. So I was already put on a beware list, keep away from this guy, he's not one of us, me.
Who told them that?
People in the Haganah, that was what.
So, you do remember being sworn into the Etzel at Ruby Rivlin's father, basically, who's the president of Israel right now, his father's house in Jerusalem.
Yeah, I remember.
And you were given, I'm sure, a name, an underground name?
Daniel.
Daniel?
Yeah.
And you were...
And that's just the way Begin knows me, as Daniel.
Did you ever meet him? Not at that time, of course not.
No, but...
after. And what is your first assignment? Where do you, when you join the Etzel, what's the situation in the country? Is it in the middle of the Independence War? Is it, what's going on?
The middle of the Independence War.
So apparently your studies are kind of...
on the side.
But we all know, we all know by this interview that coming to study is basically just
an excuse.
An excuse to come take part in the War of Independence.
Yeah.
So now you're in the war, and you're affiliated with the Irgun, with the Etzel. And where are you sent? What's your Can you remember, or it's...
I remember waiting to... it was nighttime. I thought we were being sent to recapture the old city.
So the old city has already fallen.
Yeah. Instead, we went to defend Ramat Rachel against the Egyptians. I remember that. I remember that while still a student, I'd been involved in Yavne, and we used to go to the old city, to the I don't know, you want to call it defense, you know, but what to be.
You told me that you were wounded in Ramat Rachel.
Yeah.
What happened?
A shell. It wasn't a sniper.
Shrapnel. Where'd you get your shrapnel?
I got all my entire body. A shell exploded. I was in the observation post with my buddy Nissim Elbaz, his name, yeah.
Elbaz.
He's the one that said, "Got to get out of here. You can't stay here." And so I was wounded. I remember I had shrapnel over my entire body. I regained consciousness. I thought I was blind. Then I see I could get up. So I went back into the dining room where the guys were, most of them wounded also. And the Egyptians or the Legion, I don't know who it was, were advancing. I remember yelling at them or that they can't just sit around. They should get back to their positions to stop the Egyptians, the legionnaires. I remember hearing the Arabs saying Yehudi Kthir, too many Jews. And then I heard someone in English cursing them. That, these were probably from the Arab Legion. They had British officers.
Did they?
We held out until we got reinforcements. They had thought we had been wiped out, that there was nobody left.
I think it was the Jordanian Legion, not the Egyptians. Because they're the ones who had the British officers helping them.
You're right, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
How long did you guys hold out there for? In Ramat Rachel?
A couple of days, I guess.
Was the casualty rate high?
Yeah.
Of the dead? The kibbutz was evacuated, correct?
The one casualty we had was, I can't remember, I have to remember his name. This young kid from South Africa that had got me into the Etzel. He was the only casualty then.
What happened after the battle?
I remember now. Well, we had like a armistice, like a 30-day, I was the commander at Etzion, Etzion. Funny feeling.
What?
It's war, it's not war.
After Ramat Rachel, where do you go? Do you remember where?
Yasin, maybe, I'm trying. At the time, there was Purim around.
Do you remember what happened at Deir Yassin?
It was a battle. It wasn't a massacre.
Were you there?
Yeah.
What happened there? Because there's this story, that story, this story.
I wish someone could tell me. It's a funny way of putting it.
It was a mess.
In fact, there's a guy who's giving a lecture, having a whole session on Deir Yassin this week.
What happened at Deir Yassin? Were you there physically?
Yeah.
During the battle? What happened? How did
It was a battle. I don't know why they call it a massacre.
They call it a massacre because bodies were found of women and children.
I don't remember killing women and children. I remember maybe throwing grenades into homes where they were, where some of the Iraqi volunteers are dressed as women. So we weren't in a position where we went into a house and said, any we assumed every house was occupied by it. So, yeah, we threw grenades in, or bombs or whatever.
Did you realize at that moment, when you were at Deir Yassin, that this was going to be a controversial, or was it just another operation? Did you feel that there was something different going on here? Because a few days later, as we say in English, the shit hit the fan, and there was a lot of outcry, not only from the Arab world and the international world, but also Ben Gurion was like, what's going on here? If I'm not mistaken, it was a joint operation between the Etzel and the Lehi. Is that correct?
Yeah. And it was part of an overall campaign to free Jerusalem from Arab control. You know, they were having, at the castle, there was the Haganah was involved there. No, it wasn't an isolated. And Deir Yassin was intended to become an airport in case, they couldn't lift the siege of Jerusalem. They get supplies. I never see that mentioned much in talking about Deir Yassin.
Excuse me?
I don't remember many people bringing up the strategic importance of Deir Yassin.
How many people were there? How many fighters were there, or roughly?
I could name one who was with me.
Were there 100 fighters, 50? Was it 1,000?
I remember when a squad of, I don't know what you want to call them, Nachal, came in to reinforce. They were given the duty of burying bodies, which they didn't like, and they hated us.
The Deir Yassin is till this day a very gray zone in the War of Independence, because I'm not talking about historians, because they sit in a nice room and they read things and they make up their own decisions. But by talking to people that I've talked to about Deir Yassin that have told me that it was a massacre. And some people who say it wasn't at all. It was just a normal battle. So it's still till today a very, I don't know, it could be like how to the Americans, the 10th offensive in Vietnam is a very sensitive thing. Deir Yassin, till today, is a very, it's still an open wound, and that's why it's important to talk to people who've been there, like yourself, because people who weren't there and talk about it are, how can you take it serious? As even if he's an acknowledged historian, but that's why I'm asking you about Deir Yassin, because. Well, of course, I didn't know that you were there, because I didn't do any research before I came. I always like to have it come and flow within conversation, but it seems to me that it still hurts you to talk about it. I can see it on your facial expression, that it's something that...
I don't go around wearing it like a badge. I mean, no.
Did your experience at Deir Yassin, was it a different experience than it was in Ramat Rachel?
I don't see how I can compare the two.
Yeah.
People remember me like the hero in Kibbutz Ramat Rachel. But the Yassin, it's war.
I can't remember if after Deir Yassin or it was before Deir Yassin. I can't remember. Maybe you can help me out here. Was the massacre, the Mount Scopus massacre, the convoy bus with all the doctors and nurses. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Because I think that was revenge for Deir Yassin, or the exact opposite. I can't remember. I just don't. But they're linked, those two events. Because you studied at Hebrew University.
Yes.
And this was a convoy of doctors and nurses.
Yes.
Who were massacred. 60.
Yes.
Do you remember this? That
Yeah.
Where were you?
I remember the British.
Wait a sec. Just a sec. Can you say that again?
The British prevented people from coming to help that convoy. That I remember. The Lamed Hay, the 35 students, they were all my buddies. Mas, the guy who commanded them. Thank you.
You good?
Huh?
You all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. Sad.
Why?
You bring up all sorts of memories.
Is there anything that we didn't talk about? Is there anything that you feel that we missed, that we didn't talk about in our conversation? Any opinions or any events that we skipped over that are relevant to your story?
I always feared Milchemet Achim.
Civil War.
And even in the Warsaw Ghetto, you had Jews who were not united. For maybe a couple of months, there was a period where there was called Tnuat HaMeri, where Jews fought together. The emphasis was not against the British, but for getting Jews into Palestine, breaking the blockade of the British. To me, that was a period of to be proud of. They bombed bridges, railroad tracks, I don't know, you name it. It was Tnuat HaMeri.
That's when all the three undergrounds collaborated together.
Yeah.
The famous event is Leil HaGsharim, when they blew up all the bridges.
Yeah.
That was before you got here, though, I think.
I wasn't involved in that operation, I was here.
Yeah. Are there any other operations that you were involved in that we didn't talk about? We talked about Tir Yassin, we talked about Ramat Rachel.
I did a lot of things.
Okay.
I helped survey the first road from Dimona to the Dead Sea.
After the war? During the war?
Who knows? The war was going on all the time. After the war. But
after the war, did you go back to the United States, or did you stay here?
I stayed here, but I took part in the founding of Ramat Chazil, Muvot Beitar. I mean, I was commander of a camp of New Olim from Yemen.
Ma'abara, where?
Not far from here. Bar Gior, they call it now.
Okay. So you stayed after the war.
Yeah.
What did you do?
That's an example of what I did.
Yeah. How long? When did you go back to the United States?
In 1951. I don't remember exactly. If I had gotten married, I probably would never, never have left. I mean, that would have been it.
Where your wife was from?
Well, my wife she was born in Jerusalem, by the way, but she was in America. She wasn't involved in any of this. I was a wandering Jew. Nabenad.
So you moved back to the States in the early 50s?
Yeah, 51. Got married.
Where'd you live?
Lived in Brooklyn.
What'd you do?
I was finished up my engineering, got a degree, continued studying. Married, started a family. Always thinking I'd be getting back to Israel one day. Active in the Jewish community.
Yeah. What neighborhood did you live in Brooklyn?
I lived in East New York.
That's where my mother was born.
This is when I first got married.
My mother was born on Georgia Avenue.
Yeah.
In East New York.
In New Lots. And I was moved to Bensonhurst.
Mm-hmm. When did you finally make the remove to Israel?
Can't think now. When I got married, one of my conditions is that we settle in Israel. I even remember when we bought a refrigerator. So there were refrigerators which you can
convert.
So
Electricity
I
convert.
bought a refrigerator that we could take with us.
Just in case.
Yeah,
Very determined.
Yeah.
Very determined.
yeah.
So you consider yourself, you're a Jerusalemite.
Oh, yeah.
DNA.
They asked me where I was born. I said, my soul's born is from Jerusalem. I'll always be in Jerusalem.
Before we finish, is there anything that we missed, that we didn't talk about, that you feel is important?
I feel my kid sister had an important part to play in all this.
Her name?
Hannah Pesce. She was in a Naziv when the Iraqis, repelling the Iraqis. And she died. It was Yom Yerushalayim. That's how I remember. So easy.
She died at the attack?
No.
Was she a member of the kibbutz?
Yeah. Well, volunteer. I don't know if they were actual member.
But she saw combat. And I'm very glad that you mentioned her. Please remind me her name. Hannah
Pesce.
And her last name?
She was married to a Gross.
But Brodetzky.
Southern. Huh?
What maiden name?
Brodetzky.
Brodetzky. Hannah Brodetzky.
Yeah.
So that we can have it on record. On
Yes.
this tape.
She
What she did.
deserves to be remembered. And she died a horrible ALS. It's not
Did she also stay in Israel, or she went back to the States?
She stayed. She married a guy from South Africa.
Machal.
Who had been the, but then they weren't adapted to kibbutz life.
Okay.
So they went to South Africa.
Okay.
Then she didn't like South African society.
Apartheid.
They came to America.
My friend, we're gonna. Are you okay?
Very sad.
I understand.
We say, Yehi Zichron Baruch. May their memories be blessed. And I'm happy to be part of any effort. Not just to remember. I don't know. Memorialize has to be more than just putting a stone.
Well, that's what we're doing right now.
So I welcome every opportunity where people want to come and interview me. I have one grandson who set up a blog along that theme.
Okay.
But the war isn't over.
Excuse me?
The war is not over. I went overtime.
Thank you very much.
It's been such a pleasure. You're doing a tremendous job, right?
Thank you very much.
I like shaking hands.
You should have done it at the beginning.